Okay, so we are going to go on to our last speaker of the day now, who is Chris Gilham. Now, Chris is a trustee and co-founder of the charity Gambling Harm UK, but might be known to many here as co-founder and host of the All Better Off Gambling Addiction Recovery podcast, and also from currently co-hosting the Guiding Light Mental Health and Recovery podcast. Chris has a lived experience of gambling harm and alcohol dependence and was diagnosed with ADHD 3 years ago. He's also a parent with 2 children who, like Chris, allow him to navigate life with neurodivergent brains. So, Chris, big welcome and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and hi all, and what an interesting morning it's been, and early afternoon as well. I've been scribbling lots of stuff down because that's one of the things that happens in my mind. I get little ideas and I think, oh, I've got to scribble something down there or I'll forget it. And if I do forget it, it won't happen. But if I scribble it down, I might do something about it. And then I get totally focused upon it and will do that for a long time. And then I'll realise hours and hours have passed because I've been in hyper focus and I haven't done the work or something that I should have done. That is a standard kind of day for me. So, yeah, I've just really enjoyed being here first and foremost. I think these discussions are so important. I think they're important because, well, firstly, when I came into recovery for both gambling addiction and for alcohol dependence, I just thought I was like, for some reason, I'd got addicted to these things. And, people do for different reasons. But I didn't know why. I didn't know why. And it was always important for me to kind of find out why, which is why I went off and did other things. But when I first got into recovery, which was when I was 36, it's an interesting thing for me, I find, because I started drinking at a young age, 14, it started to become a pretty normal thing. It started to make me feel like I could fit into situations. When I got to work, it helped me to do my work. I was unable to start tasks. I didn't know why. I was scared to start something and I was scared to do it in case it was never good enough at the end. And I felt paralyzed, it's like this paralysis. And this morning, and it was touched on, this, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I didn't know what that was, but I always knew that I was in incredible pain when I didn't do as well as I wanted to, or somebody said something to me which just felt like I'd been stabbed in the gut or punched in the stomach. And for me, I do feel it physically as well as mentally, and it can be draining to then be able to come back from that and then kind of restart the day again. And I never used to be able to do that. It was about escaping, and that's what the alcohol was first of all for me. And then I started gambling, but that wasn't until I was 30, and I stopped by the time I was 36. But it was horrendous. That was a point of my life where things just got worse and worse and worse. The alcohol was terrible, but I think it would have continued for longer. And actually, I would have possibly been drinking now still, and I'd be in a bad place. But I don't think I would have as quickly hit that rock bottom as I did if I hadn't found gambling. But I never enjoyed gambling. I never liked gambling. It wasn't anything I did as a youngster. It wasn't anything I had any interest in doing when I actually did it. But one day I saw an advert and there was an impulse. I downloaded an app and I bet. And from that moment, I got hooked pretty quickly because I kept getting emails. I kept getting messages saying, I'll come back and do that again. So I did. And then I got, nudged towards different products, and then I was given free bets to go into a casino, and I couldn't not do that. I couldn't not do that. I didn't feel like I had an option. There was this impulse. It was like, oh, I'll just do it once and then I'll stop. I've got to do it one more time. I'll do it one more time. And I wasn't enjoying it. But what I found was my head became quieter. And what I mean by that is I found something I could focus upon in my daily life. And I've heard this said earlier as well about, being able to hear things and stuff that maybe others aren't hearing, or there's just so many external things that are coming into my head. And in my head at the same time, there are different conversations going on between different parts of thoughts that I'm having. And I'll be trying to do something on my computer for work, and in my head I'll be thinking about something totally different, and I'll imagine myself in a helicopter looking down at a field with 4 or 5 different circles on it, trying to pull some problem together that I think's going to, I don't know, change the world or something, while I'm supposed to be doing something else. When I gambled, none of that happened. When I gambled, I was gambling. It was just gamble, gamble, gamble. Nothing else came into my head. And at the same time, where I have the issue, dopamine, don't have the right amount. We spoke about serotonin. We spoke about all these things already today. And I was getting that hit regularly. And I guess that made me feel a little bit more comfortable. And it got to a point where I knew there was so much harm. I knew how much this was hurting me. I knew how much it was hurting people around me, or I knew how much it would hurt them when they found out. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. And it was making me feel like I could live. It was basically making me feel like I could live through a day. And that was it, really. It was really, really tough. But I've made a few notes about things today that I find really interesting, because I decided not to do a presentation or anything, because I thought, coming on at the end, let's see some of the things that have been said and let me see what I think about them. And really interestingly, like I just said there, my story was around alcohol and gambling. And I came into recovery, and it was 3 years later that I found out I had ADHD. Now, for me, there's a massive issue there. That's really difficult. I don't know how I managed to not gamble or drink for 3 years, except I've just said that, and I do realise it's because I was binge eating. I recognise now that actually I should probably get some help as well around eating. I've known this for a while, and I've been thinking it for quite some time, and that's what I need to do. And I've got a very close friend who has the same, and we talk about this stuff a lot. I didn't recognise this stuff. But what happened was that was what I moved to after I stopped alcohol and after I stopped gambling. And that was during a period of what I felt was really good recovery for me. And it was. I was going to AA meetings, I was going to GA meetings, things that I still do. I attend AA meetings every Saturday, for example. That is my at least one meeting a week, and then I'll go and do more as and when I need them or want them. That's the other thing. I might want them. But I didn't consider this eating stuff at all. But one of the things, and I love the fellowships, I really, really do, but I found I wanted more and needed more, and I didn't know why. But people would say to me, no, just come here, you'll be fine. Just keep coming here, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. You don't need to find out why you gamble. You don't need to find out why you gamble. And I used to read that in the GA literature. It says something like, our members don't feel it necessary. I've never found it useful to find out why they gamble. And that used to really puzzle me. I'm like, of course I'm going to keep coming back. This is great. I'm talking to people who've been through this. They understand my head a lot, and it's great. I get a lot of support here. But I could work that bit out. It didn't sit right with me. So I went off and I tried to find things out. Well, it took me 3 years and a lot of very, very difficult, dark times to get to a place where I found out I had ADHD. And from that moment, things changed, because suddenly I've heard about some stuff around guilt and stigma and stuff today. I felt a lot of that stuff disappear, because I suddenly realised I have been through what I've been through, not just because I made terrible choices, but actually because my brain is programmed in a certain way. And therefore, I was trying to find ways to live through my days, to cope. And okay, these may not have been the best coping mechanisms to find, but I found coping mechanisms really just to survive without knowing who I was. So once I got to a place where I knew who I was, what I wanted to do was go and find out more about it. It was only then that I started to read about things like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which we've heard about today and I've already mentioned. And I was like, wow, I felt this all the time. No wonder this is terrible. But having learned about it, it isn't good enough to then just say, right, this is how I feel, I'm going to have to deal with it. Because I'm going to feel like that. I need to know how I'm going to deal with it. And I try and be a bit proactive with some of this stuff. So I was off work for a long time when I was waiting to, basically when I'd been diagnosed with ADHD, getting on medication, which has made the world of difference to me. And I was in a place where I didn't know what to do, to be honest with you, but I knew that I was going back to work and people were going to say stuff to me. I was like, some of it's going to hurt. I went back, and one of the things I said right at the start to my boss was, one of the things I've learned since getting my ADHD diagnosis is I am very sensitive to rejection. Therefore, when we talk about how I'm doing at work, or when I ask for feedback, or when you're going to give me feedback, can we just remember that? Because I might look like I'm going to cry or die. I'm not. But let's just think about how we can do that compassionately, so I can take it on board, because I want to know, because I want to have the opportunity to grow. And I can't grow unless you tell me, but equally, I know I find it hard. So this has been the amazing part for me. It was finding out that I'm neurodivergent. it was then being able to think that's going to come with challenges forever. But hey ho, I've faced challenges all my life anyway. But now I'm going to work out ways I can go through day to day and manage those challenges. Some days will be difficult, some days will be easier, parts of days will be harder, parts of days will be easier. Then I get a toolkit in place to try and deal with that. So things like mindfulness, for example. I love mindfulness. Sometimes I will sit there and try and sit still, do breathing exercises and things like that. And in my early recovery, these were things that I was trying to do while laying on a bed, and people saying, no, you'll be all right, it'll happen, it'll happen. So hard, because I just wanted to run around while I was doing it. So now I go mindful walking a lot. I get out and about, I walk, I listen to the sounds, I hold the leaves, I touch the leaves, I look at the shape of things, and I've worked out ways that I can get what I need, but by doing it in ways that work for my mind, and living in a world which doesn't necessarily cater for the likes of me and the likes of many, many, many others. That's difficult. We have to find that out ourselves. So really, one of the things I like to try and do is share these experiences, and in doing that, make people realize, oh, there are other ways and there are other people I can talk to, and we need to be engaged in this conversation. And there certainly does need to be much more research around this stuff, because I was talking to Mark and David the other day and talking about prevention, and kind of going into schools and telling children about, gambling, and, this is what it is, these are the dangers, this is how the industry may try and hook you in, this is around near misses and all this kind of near wins, all this kind of stuff. But you know what? I didn't know as a youngster who didn't like gambling that I had something about me that meant I was more likely to become addicted to something, even though I didn't like it. So if we understand ourselves at a young age, and if we do that by the kind of education and through individuals getting the right health support so they understand who they are as a human, then hopefully, I believe, we can give them better information for themselves to understand the challenges that they may have going forward, and actually better decisions that they may or may not make. I would never have thought that I could become addicted to gambling because I didn't like it. It didn't make any sense to me, but I very quickly did. But now looking back, it makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to think about, I wonder what would have happened if somebody told me this when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, keep reinforcing that message. And then I found out I had ADHD, and I'd have gone, crikey, that was lucky I didn't do those things that could have caused me a lot of harm. So I guess that's where I'm at with those kind of things. And I find that really, really interesting. I'm not going to say much else because I think there's a bit more to move on to, but I was just going to quickly share my screen because I think this is a really good example of ADHD in action. So if I can find the slide that I was just doing. This might be it here. Okay, so because I've got ADHD, I don't get things done on time. So this is proof of that. So this is what I'm going to share afterwards, because what I wanted to do was basically go through some of these things here, not talk about them because I don't want to talk about all these things today, but these are stuff that have helped me learn who I am, but also through talking to others and then trying to make some kind of difference. So with Gambling Harm UK, for example, we do a lot of work with medical students and medical schools, and that's really important. From that stuff we've heard today around comorbidity and stuff, and how if you go into a doctor and they think you may have ADHD, well, let's screen for gambling, and vice versa. So I'll leave it there. I will share these bits later, but thank you for being here today. I've certainly learned more, and yeah, let's just keep engaging in these conversations, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Really engaging as ever. Really great to share your story. So thank you so much for that. We're hoping you're going to stay a little bit more, because the next part, really, or the last part of today, really, is just a sort of an overview, but just to talk a little bit from a lived experience perspective and a lived experience panel. So, as well as yourself, Chris, we've got a Robbie Nimmin here, who himself has his own experience of gambling harms and was diagnosed with ADHD age 21. We would have had Jordan. Jordan, unfortunately, as I said, isn't here, and we were going to have Brian Dimmick, who unfortunately can't make it due to system problems. So, but again, Brian, his experience is that he is someone now waiting for a diagnosis. with ADHD, and that uncertainty for him and the mom can be a life-changing result. So I suppose I wanted to just start off by asking Chris and Robbie, and also I suppose, you know, if anyone wants to share or ask questions in the room about, you know, what are your thoughts on what you've heard today? Chris, you've already mentioned that you've learned some things, and I thought what would be the one takeaway, if you had a takeaway to take from today? And that goes out to Chris and Robbie and others.
I'm happy to jump in first if you want. I'll give someone else a chance because I've just been talking. But for me, the important thing to, I think, take away is that regardless of whether there is a lot of research confirming this at the moment, there is most definitely correlation between neurodivergence and harm through gambling. There's no doubt about it. As soon as I said that I had been diagnosed with ADHD and went and spoke to people about how I'd felt and what I'd found out, so many people came to me and just spoke and said, I think that's me too. I think that's me too. And a number of them have been diagnosed since. You know, I don't think that there's any kind of surprise there, but I think we definitely need to understand these things because products that are out there are much more dangerous potentially for individuals like us. If you think of industry messaging around, you set your limits, your tools and all that kind of stuff, I think there's a place for all them. I really, really do. But for someone like me, I'm not going to be able to set that and leave it there because actually I'm so impulsive because of how my brain is, how I'm wired, how I was made up. So for me, that is, I think, the biggest takeaway today.
That's Chris. That's great. We'll speak to Pauline, and then we'll hopefully grab Robbie, who I think's on. Pauline, put your hand up.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, that was a fantastic talk. Thank you. And I just got a couple of feedbacks, if that's okay. So I'll just come back to you first. I'm actually a bit disappointed about what you said about GA. I'm on the national committee now, and I'm just trying to change things a bit. But I mean, 10 years ago when I joined, there was very much culture of, right, oh, don't go to a psychologist, don't do this, don't do that, because GA is everything. But you know, where I am now in Manchester, we're definitely not like that. You know, it's whatever help you need from outside, you get that help as well as come to meetings. So we definitely encourage people to do other things. And then anecdotally as well, I think I do recognise in other people, whether they know themselves or not, and some of them do, gone for ADHD in particular screening, and see that as maybe a positive thing after they've come to GA and recognise they have other issues. And I think that's a great thing. And I do go to quite a few different meetings in the region and also in other places in the country as well. My daughter lives in London, so I go to quite a few southern meetings when I go to visit her. And I also like to share my experiences, and also I'm waiting for other diagnoses, but I am quite brightly dressed, and like somebody says to me, it is fairly obvious to them. But I like to, because I like to make other people feel comfortable. But you know, anecdotally, it is fairly obvious to me that there are other people, and I just like to make people feel comfortable and know that it is okay and they are welcome, you know, in the fellowship, whatever and whoever they are. So I am a bit disappointed that, you know, you've had that reaction. But also, you know, back to other presentations and Dr. Curley's presentation, that there's the slide he showed, like illustrating the strategies of how the gambling industry really sucks you in as a gambler, and I totally identify with every single one of those strategies, how they suck us in, every single one of them. And those stories, again, I hear those every day with people coming into the rooms and saying X, Y, Z. Those things happen to me, and they just get you into such serious trouble. So, you know, I agree with what he said, that we do need in some way to address those, both with the help we give and how we stop those things happening in the first place, you know, with the gambling industry. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. I'm going to go to Robbie, and then I'm going to go to John Paul, if that's okay. Robbie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Any thoughts from you? Any takeaways? Good to hear you.
I think just generally throughout the day, it's just very, I think relating to different experiences of lots of different people, but also at the same time understanding that everyone's on their own journey and it's not the exact same for everyone with ADHD. Yeah, whenever someone was talking about gaming, I've completely relate to that. Even I know nowadays we talk about the loot boxes and everything and how gambling and gaming, but even when I would have been maybe a teenager, I was playing a lot of games online and stuff, but this was before the gambling came in. But even at then, it was always one more till you were up till 4 or 5 in the morning, just telling yourself it's going to be one more. And later on in life, that's where gambling took me. It was similar situation to the gambling. And I think whenever we were talking about a lot of people seem to have got diagnosed in adulthood, I can relate to that as well a lot. And I don't know, maybe that's something that maybe people explore after they stop gambling, because obviously gambling masks everything. So when you're in the midst of your gambling addictions, you're not thinking about what else is going on in your life, really. You're just so zoned in on that. So I think someone talked about having ADHD screenings and then a gambling screening. I think also it would be beneficial whenever people having gambling screenings to then counteract that with ADHD screenings as well. There was something else, but I forget what it was. Yeah, I'll come back to it. I'll put my hand up if I remember. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks, Robert. John Paul? Are you there?
Hi. Hi. Yeah, first of all, I want to say thanks a lot for everybody who spoke today, because it was really, really insightful. I had a few questions actually for Alan. The first one is, you mentioned maybe potentially using the treatment for ADHD to help people recover from gambling addiction. So I was wondering if you can go a bit deeper on that chain of thought. And the second one was regarding, all the techniques that the industry is using to, draw in neurodivergent and young people. Do you think some of them can be used to, undo the harm that they've done? Thank you.
So yes, in terms of the first point, treatments for ADHD being used in gambling addiction, yes, I do. I mean, I think at the moment there is research for all those 5 neurotransmitters that I talked about. You could argue a case for treatments involving any of those neurotransmitter pathways could potentially be used for not only neurodiversity, so ADHD, autism, but also for gambling addiction and possibly other addictions, because all of these neurotransmitters either affect your mood or the reward system or your impulse control abilities or calming anxieties or heighten excitement. So all of them are potentially, all of these pathways are targets for medications or drugs. That's why illegal drugs do them as well, and people get addicted to them. So yeah, they're all targets. And I think that if you can access some of these treatments or create new ones, then you've got the ability to not only treat some of the neurodiversity symptoms, but also actually maybe treat addiction, because people are using the addiction as a way of self-medicating for sometimes feeling they're either overwhelmed or they're not coping or they don't connect the way they'd like to connect, or they don't feel they're getting the same high from life, or they're not getting the same rewards from life, for whatever reason. So yeah. And on the second point you said about the techniques that they use in the gambling industry, could we use them for good? Strange enough, yes. I mean, I'm a big advocate for, I think we could use more of that in education. So when you do have young people with neurodivergent conditions, using more sensory stimulation, sensory engagement, reward systems, using almost a gaming type of format for them to learn, rather than sit at a desk where they have to sit for an hour at a time, when we know that they may have hyperactivity, they need to be more physically or sensory engaged. Having to open a book and read, when we know that some of the aspects of reading through dyslexia or whatever can be impaired. So I do think we could learn a lot from how the gaming industry or the gambling industry do it, and actually take that into the classroom and help people learn and raise awareness using those types of technologies. So
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jean-Paul. I think Mark was next.
Yes, thank you, David. It's actually that Steve has put a question in the Q&As. Should gambling operators be screening for neurodiversity as part of the KYC process? That's the know your customer process. And can they do that from a practical point of view? What I would say at this point is it's a slight shame that Kieran wasn't able to be here, because or indeed Jordan, because I think they're both people who would be able to answer this question quite well. I mean, Kieran, I'm not personally, I don't think that operators can be expected to ask people whether they're being diagnosed with neurodivergent conditions. I think that's a big ask. I think that's above and beyond any reasonable request in that one. What I would say though is, and from what Kieran was testifying to, from his long experience of being, everyone in many cases in the early days when he was the sole customer contact, if you want safer gambling contact for some rather large poker organizations, that you get an inkling from speaking to people of there are signs you can identify that might suggest that there are potential neurodivergent conditions there. So what I would suggest is perhaps, and this is something that Kieran actually did with some of the operators he worked with, some of the training that, if you want, the training that goes towards the safer gambling teams, there should be an element in there where they're also made aware of neurodiversity and some of the symptoms, some of the manifestations that perhaps should be looking for, and perhaps also a way of being able to ask in a respectful way if they're having a customer interaction, if they may have a sort of neurodivergent condition or diagnosis. But I would suggest that perhaps speaking to Kieran or even to Jordan would be the first thing I would suggest. I think they probably have very good insight into what can be done in terms of providing operators, safe gambling teams with learning and some understanding. And obviously many of the people we've had speaking on today would probably also have good ideas about if you want how people could be sort of made more aware of recognizing sort of neurodiversity in behaviors and interactions that customers have. But I'll throw that, if anyone else on the panel has any thoughts on that themselves before we go to Robbie.
If I could just quickly jump in there, Mark, I think it's an interesting one. I think it's hard to expect any operator to do it, but I just find it very interested in like, I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know I had it, like we said, and a lot of people don't know and they get diagnosed after. So if you're showing markers of somebody who, you know, through research would show people who tend to gamble like this are quite often neurodivergent, they may have some kind of difficulty. You know, maybe there is part of a solution there to helping people find out sooner. But it would have shocked me if somebody came and said, "Are you neurodiverse?" Because I'd have said, "Oh, no, of course not. No, absolutely not," because I didn't know. So that's the interesting bit that I find. How could they help us find out, I suppose, if we don't already know?
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Robert, did you remember what you were going to say?
Yeah. So the last thing I was going to say was about, obviously we were talking about going to be screening people for ADHD and stuff after the fact. But the obviously a big problem at the minute is waiting lists. I originally got when I was about 11 or 12, and it was marked as inconclusive. At that time, I think just being a kid and maybe going against this, didn't really want to have it. It was sort of marked as inconclusive, but I was given a letter to give me extra time in exams because I could never finish an exam in school. Even when I was 21, I was starting uni and needed to get tested because to have it official on paper, and it was a matter of a few weeks before I got it was a matter of a few weeks before I was able to get tested. But now a few years after that, I stopped taking the medication because of an employer's attitudes towards it. I'll not get into that, but basically I tried to get back on it about a year ago, and I'm still waiting for a phone call to even talk about getting back on medication, and that's with me already being diagnosed. They told me if you weren't diagnosed, you'd be waiting at least 5 years to even get a phone call about coming in. So it's just a very difficult thing about it. And I think also once someone's starting their journey of recovery and gambling, it's important to, obviously with ADHD, excess energy, impulse and that sort of thing, I think it's important to bring something meaningful back into your life. I'd stopped gambling, and that was my prior focus, stopping gambling and taking as much overtime as I could, working myself just so hard to get as much money as fast as I could to pay off my debts as fast as I could, rather than thinking about it logically. And that's what I did when I was gambling. Just worked to get my money gambling. The first maybe 6-7 months of recovery, I was doing that to try and pay off things. But it was after that when I realized that if I start doing things and taking things back that gambling took away from me, life's a lot easier when you're actually doing something positive as well. Going to the gym, going swimming, just basic things that when you're in the midst of gambling, you don't even think about. But yeah, I think that's a very important thing for anyone in recovery, especially with ADHD.
Well, thanks, Robin. I think Francesca she's putting there about right to choose, which is there. So there's a link there. It's been put in there as well.
Yeah, I tried that, but I think pretty sure that's only over in England. Right, I don't think it's over the seas, unfortunately, because yeah, it's just a very difficult situation to be in general.
Yeah. No, I mean, and again, we spoke about this, and we spoke today about the waiting times, didn't we, and about the fact how that impacts. I think for me, the takeaway I've got so far is that, yeah, there's clearly a link between gambling and neurodiversity, and the more I hear, I've learned so much, and the more I hear, the more it resonates with things that I did, or I feel, or even now. And I think, even going back to that first trip to the doctors all those years ago, and them not even taking gambling seriously as an addiction, or identifying, or just give me medication, and the wrong medication, and antidepressants, to then also be aware that there might be a link in with neurodiversity. It feels like there's a lot more work to do and a lot more research needs to be done. But I think the sooner we can get those diagnoses, the sooner we can then make sure that people are getting the right support and the right treatment and whatever that is. And I think that's highlighted this today. And I think, from what I've heard, I don't know what people are thinking, this is why it's open session, but there's clearly links there from what I would say. Absolutely. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or anything they'd like to ask or comment on? Or so, Mark.
You can't shut me up now.
No.
I think it's very interesting from what we've heard today. I mean, I think Chris's point in response to the question that Steve posted about the fact that many people don't realise they're neurodivergent, don't realise they're ADHD or autism or any other condition. And I think that kind of goes down to something that I think it was Pippa was mentioning at the start about, as you grow into adulthood, you adapt. I mean, if you feel like you're not fitting in, something's not right, you tend to subconsciously adapt your life to make it more manageable for you. So therefore, you may not be conscious that you've made that adaptation. You may not be super conscious that you've made that adaptation on your own behalf. It's questionable whether it's actually a neurodiverse condition, but for instance, my sister, she is actually she's been diagnosed with aphantasia, which is an inability to create mental images in your mind. So you can't, if somebody asks you to imagine an apple, well, most people can probably visualize an apple. People with this condition can't visualize it. But it's one of these things. It wasn't until she was sort of well into her 40s that she realized that she couldn't do what other people could, that she couldn't visualize something. She just assumed that nobody could. And I think that's kind of a sign as well that what we perceive as normal is what we expect to be normal. And it's the reverse sign of, I think, within society, when society expects us to behave in a certain way and interact a certain way, if that's not how we interact, which many people with neurodiversity sort of struggle to, it can be very alienating. It can also lead to the need to sort of find other ways, sort of, for instance, to create the privacy, the social interactions away from real life in an online situation. And it touches also upon, I think, an idea of I'm trying to remember two A's. No, attenuation and association, which when most people grow up, you sort of form attachments and attenuation, I think. So you form attachments with people in your life. So normally most people form attachments with their mothers in the early instance. But on a social level, there's also a case of attunement. You can attune with someone simply because they seem to align, they have commonality with you, they align with the way you interact and think. But when it comes to society, there's such a thing as societal attunement and attachment. If you live in a society where the society doesn't seem to fit in with who you are, it often it occurs in everyone if you it's racial discrimination. If you don't look like somebody, everyone around you don't sound like them, it's the areas where it creates a sort of level of stress, which then can lead towards it affects it sort of, if you want, the neuroreceptors as well that you go up with, and it can affect your ability to feel part of the community, and you might feel you need to step aside. And I suspect within neurodiversity that is such a big thing. I think so many people, particularly young people growing up, come to realize that they are not like other people rather aren't like them and don't communicate in the same way. I suspect that there will be a stage when young people's development where they're particularly vulnerable to finding other ways of associating with reality and with people. And I suspect sort of gaming, which I think can lead on to gamification into gambling, I suspect that is one area where there is a strong correlation between people perhaps becoming exposed to harmful behaviours around gambling.
Thanks, Mark and Van. Thanks for sharing that. There's a question. This question has come in. There's one from Jason 3 minutes ago, I think, in the Q&A, and he's just asked about: is there anywhere to find information about getting involved or helping in this area, whether that's sharing experience of gambling harm, ADHD, crime, or sharing insight about practical aspects of enablement or blockers, etc. I mean, I would say that obviously being on here today is one way to share that. GLEN are interested in having those conversations and having those communications, but I think there's always room to have, you know, experience from lived experience. Absolutely. Mark, anything you want to add to that on that question?
And not for me, but what I would say is, and conscious we're now sort of after 1 o'clock, briefly say, I mean, thank you very much to all the contributors and everyone who's been present. Although we officially sort of scheduled to finish at 1 o'clock, what we are intending is to keep this meeting discussion going until a very hard cut of 2 o'clock, but really until people, if you want, manage to get any question they've got answered or run out of things to say. So thank you very much for everyone who came along. And as I say, to the marvelous speakers we had, we will be sending out a post-event material next week, which will include the handouts that Pippa provided, and we will include the biogs again, and any questions that come into us on this forum which aren't answered during the day, we will also try to record all those and pass them around and provide answers to those as well. We put in the chat earlier that one of the reasons why we're doing this, Glenn, is to try and create interconnections, to try and join people together who have got things to say and knowledge to pass on. So if anyone in the audience feels that they as an individual or the organisation has something they can contribute to this, I mean, if you want to drop us a line at info.glenetwork.org, it was in the chat earlier, we'd be more than happy to include contact details as a subsection in the information we pass on. But as to the question you asked, sorry, David, I forgot what the question was now. I'm very sorry to have asked it.
No, it's fine. I kind of, yeah.
Right.
It was the one in the Q&A from Jason. There was a question as well.
Oh, right.
It was the one around the getting involved, helping in this area, whether that's sharing experience of harm, gambling harm, ADHD, crime, or sharing any insights, practical aspects of enablement, blockers, etc.
Well, I suspect what we'll do is, if somebody knows the answer to that, as I say, if they want to sort of email us at info.glenetwork.org, we will share people's responses to that. So if anybody feels they can answer that question, please give us the answer, let us know, and we will share that in the wider material we pass out. So they will be, I'm sure that's the beauty about collaboration. There will be people on here on this call who probably are able to answer that and provide help. Yeah. But I don't know if anyone else on the panel has.
No, Robbie has reached out as well in relation to the question from. Sorry, was it now? Can't think of the name now. Robbie, you there, aren't you? Sorry.
Yeah, me? Hello? You think
On you
you're
go,
okay?
Robbie.
Oh, I was just going to, I saw the question, but I've just written if the person who asked wants to write their email, because obviously we're running after 1, I'm happy to do that instead.
Yeah, that was the question from Graciela Santos about how do we approach
Yeah.
someone who has many of the symptoms prescribed today, but is very against and is prejudiced against seeking diagnosis for ADHD.
Yeah, do you want me to just go now? Is that okay? Do we have enough time?
The session's open, Robbie. Yeah, we're here still.
Yeah.
So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that it's a very difficult situation, and there's not really much you can do for someone that's very against it. Whenever I was talking earlier about originally going for the tests when I was very young and get marked as inconclusive, I believe if I played ball with them, it would, like, I always knew I had ADHD because I knew from then that I did. I think if I played ball with them, it definitely was coming back. I knew for a fact it was going to be positive for ADHD, but it was the fact that I was pushing against this, and I didn't want to be seen as different, or I didn't want it to affect, not that it would affect, but affect my educational attainment and that sort of thing. I thought what they were trying to say was that I wasn't very good in school and that sort of thing. When I think when you learn about it later in life, when I was 21, starting university, yes, I knew I had it, and because I knew that it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't change me as a person with this label on me. And I think maybe education, that's just me growing up later in life, being aware that it's not the end of the world, and it's just the way it is, and it doesn't change me as a person and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a very difficult situation to be in. Probably education, or when the person's ready, educating people that it's not a personal attack against them, which obviously sometimes with ADHD, like we talked about previously in the meeting, sometimes we do feel like things are personally attack against us. So yeah, just trying to explain things in a sensitive manner, and yeah, I hope that somewhat answered it, because I know it's a question that doesn't really have a definitive answer, and if someone else was answering the question, they could have a completely different answer, I'd say.
Thanks, Robbie. No, thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Yeah, appreciate it. Steve.
Hi, yeah.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. Just going back to the point about screening for possibly screening for neurodiversity. I think one of the licensing conditions of the Gambling Commission is to protect children and vulnerable people. And I guess one of the conclusions that I'm drawing from the fairly short time I've been with you today is that neurodiverse people are vulnerable to gambling harms, more vulnerable than large parts of the population. And I guess that, and I kind of can't get my head round that. I feel that somehow that there must be I don't know, online or screening mechanisms available to screen for ADHD. Maybe there's not, maybe the technology is not there, but I don't, must be questions, for example, that a doctor would ask when you go and see them. And so I don't know, I guess just somehow, while I realize it might be above and beyond at the moment to work it into the KYC, I kind of feel that at some stage it ought to become part of that KYC process, even if it's not at the moment. Do you see what I mean?
Steve, yes, I do see what you mean. I do think it's a challenge. As I was saying, I suspect it's one of these areas where the I mean, I've not been taught how to look for neurodiversity manifestations, attributes. There will be many people out there who are. Whether there's been a tool developed which can, if you want to do it online. I vaguely think I saw in the lead up to this webinar, I did think I saw something about that, about there are now online abilities to do it sort of quicker. But I do feel there's also slight danger if you're relying on almost gamification, if you want, sort of a process for online automatic process of trying to identify symptoms or sort of come up with a diagnosis that it's not going to be nuanced to in the same way as speaking to an individual who's experienced it and trained and can recognise and has long experience of recognising neurodiverse conditions. So I think it will be a difficult one. As far as the gambling regulations, yes, one of the three guiding principles, the one about protecting children and vulnerable people from experiencing harm from gambling. I do feel that to some extent, I think, I mean, this may sound counterintuitive to recognizing that neurodiverse individuals are a particularly vulnerable, maybe a particularly vulnerable group. I do think to some extent we need to revisit that and drop the word vulnerable from there. I think what we should be asking is that people, whether it's children, whether they're vulnerable, whether they're anyone else, that people are protected from being harmed by gambling. Because I think if you can be harmed by something, then you're vulnerable to being harmed by that bad thing. So I think we need to slightly step away from saying that it's only children or particular vulnerable groups who should be protected. I think we should be asking the regulators to ensure that everybody is given due protection, duty protection for all people, so that it's a case of the product cannot be used harmfully to some extent. But I don't know if anyone else has got anything to say on that.
I guess the only sort of my comment on that would be that a gambling operator would tell you that it's not harmful to X% of the population, right?
Yeah. I think for me, Steve, just with the operators themselves, I mean, it's difficult even now just to sort of look at the harms, make them be aware of the harms that are happening anyway for people. You know, even with the fact there's no checks really done, there's nothing in place the red flags aren't really looked at, I think. And there's probably also a thing for them about, well, you know, they wouldn't want to promote or be involved with thinking that they're affecting people with ADHD or neurodiversity. So I think it's going to be a real challenge, that, isn't it? But I think you're right. I think there needs to be something. But yeah, I think it'd be really difficult for them to recognise that, you know.
Yeah, I do think there's scope for what operators could be doing is talking something along the lines of Kieran provide added sort of neurodiverse awareness to some of the training he was doing to safer gambling teams. I think perhaps some of the companies, organisations out there who do provide safer gambling training to the operators teams, I think it's an area where they could well do with perhaps considering looking into and seeing if they can include that in the training awareness they give to operatives, because I think you're quite right. I mean, it's an individual basis, but I think there will be many cases where, as Kieran sort of testified to, where it will be possible that the customer who is experiencing harms has a neurodivergent condition, is neurodivergent, has a condition that makes it hard for self-regulation, and if you want the normal protections that might be there to be as effective for them. So I think training that makes people more able to detect and aware and be aware of potential for this happening in interactions. But I think, I mean, perhaps Alan might have a better idea on this as to if he's, so I'm not sure Alan's still here, about whether there are any whether there are any screening tools, automated screening tools, sort of short response screening tools that can be used to sort of efficiently and effectively diagnose.
Yeah, thank you. I think Alan's gone, Mark. Can
I just jump in there quickly, David, because something just comes to mind for me. But it's like we have figures of how much, you know, operators make from those of us who are harmed through gambling, those who are deemed as addicted, or, you know, above a certain level on the problem gambling severity index. But I wonder what that profitability difference would be between those who are neurodivergent v those who aren't neurodivergent, because that would be a really interesting thing. Because of course we want them to scream, we don't want it to happen, but if they are going to be making a larger amount maybe from those individuals, it's just that interesting discussion around them protecting against profitability and stuff. And yeah, just something that sprung to mind, something that probably has never been done. It'd be great if it could be done to find that out. I'd love to know.
Good point, Chris. Okay, Paul, how you doing? You okay? Get your hand up.
Is not Steve first?
I think Steve just spoken, Paul. Thank you.
All right. I wasn't sure this how much to love us all.
No, thank you.
Just a couple of points. It's been a really, really insightful 3.5 hours. I really appreciate it. I mean, you broached a lot of subjects which one are difficult to talk about, but also they need to be talked about. Just a couple of points. I like the comment you made a little while ago, Mark, about getting rid of the word vulnerable people, because everybody's vulnerable. You don't need to say that. And it's if you think, like for instance, I think a lot of people know this, but I was a child gambler in Blackpool, and you know, I started when I was 10, and I get the impression from the music that's been said today that gambling found us, not we found gambling. And because the predatory aspects of how the seek us and keep us and destroy us makes us feel that because our situation got so much out of hand, it's all our own fault. And I think that's something that, you know, there's one thing about the lived experience which has come to the fore in the last 3 or 4 years, is the fact that there's more collaboration with lived experience and also the treatment providers. One thing Pauline said before about being part of GA and being the public relations officer. I remember going to GA for the first 7 years in 1987. Every week for 7 years. I'm not a gambler since then. And the thing about GA, what works is because of the more similarities rather than differences, and that's precipitated into lived experience per se. But when I went to a GA AGM in 2005, I asked to become the youth officer for Gamblers Anonymous, because I understood that the internet was getting really into the fore, and they had a vote in that room on that day, and they said no. And the reason why they said no is they said young people will come when they're ready, and that's always stuck with me, that. And it's coming to again to what Mark said about before. Sometimes, and it's the core of this seminar today, is that, and Chris highlighted it more so after his addiction stopped, is that there's an underlying reason why we've gambled. It might be our character trait or our personality or some sort of in our makeup, and that's why this way of thinking, where we have to look at all avenues to why people do gamble, because the bottom line is that the people that don't gamble in this world, unfortunately, still think, one, it's brought up upon ourselves, and secondly, it's a monetary problem. You know, it's not we're against gambling, we're against people becoming problem gamblers in a way. I mean, I don't like using the word problem gamblers, but so changing the music about why we're in this space is crucial. And I just want to say thank you so much for going a long way today to readdressing that, because I know for one that if it wasn't for COVID especially, this journey would probably take a few years longer because of the extreme harm that happened because of remote internet gambling in those years. But so I just want to say thank you so much today for all of that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate you enjoyed that. And thank you for your comments. That's great. I know Pauline's got a hand up.
Thanks. I don't know why it's given me two hands. I tried to put one of them down. Thanks, Paul. It's nice to meet you. And yeah, you've gone back to before my time. Yeah, I mean, I like to think that things have changed quite a bit. And, you know, I say to people these days, you know, when I go to meetings and I introduce myself, a member of the National Committee, you know, like you think that it's full of stuffy old men, and you know this is what it looks like now. And you know, we're 25% women now as well, which is good. But with regard to under 18s, you know, we're not insured to work with under 18s, and that's why we can't have them at the meetings. So you know, we definitely don't have like a youth officer or any under 18s booklets and things like that. That's unfortunate. But one of the areas that I can do in my role is education. So that's one of the things I will be looking at, so we can get involved in that as required. Is trying to look at the field of educating young people, as some people have talked about today. You know, translating how it started. And actually it reminded me, as some of the speakers of talks, I won't say what age I am, but you might guess from some of the things I've said. But I mean, I am of the age that we had those handheld devices of oh god, the name escapes me, Space Invaders. I had a Space Invaders, and I am that competitive. I played it that much that I could beat the boys at school on Space Invaders. So that's how addicted I was to computer games. Just being able to beat the boys at my school at Space Invaders on a handheld game. But you know, the type of slot games I played and arcade games I played, I didn't really see those as gambling because they were to me just games. And you know, that's the danger, isn't it? You know, with online gambling and with arcade games, they just seem like games. That's the way they're marketed, isn't it? But anyway, it's lovely to meet you all. I hope just to do some more work together with everybody as we go on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pauline. It's good to have you today. So I think we've got, two hands up were the ones who just, I think Paul and Pauline, yeah. Not sure if Paul wants to say something else. It's just a historic hand that.
Okay. Right. I think we've kind of. Sorry, Paul, were you wanting to say something else? Yes, you are. Right.
Yeah, just one last thing. I just wanted to reiterate what I said before. I think what it was with GA was when you're under 18, there's no peer support. And GA at that time, even now, there's no peer support. And I'd like to think that in treatment now, you've got tier 4, which is the NHS, you've got tier 2, which is the NGSN. But it'd be nice if we had a no tier, lived experience tier, where we could do something in this space that would facilitate like a simple triage to collaborate with the clinicians and the academics, because for me that would be the greatest step forward, because that would show all of us that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet, and no one is any better or worse than the other in helping to help people that want to help themselves.
Yeah, but because we're completely voluntary and we're unpaid, we don't have anyone with a what is it? Somebody help me out here. That you need to work with young people.
DBS checks and stuff
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, a full DBS check. So we don't have that. So we're unable to work with under 18s.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm saying is it's more lived experience space. I mean, GA is good. It helped me. It was my first port of call. It will always be something that when you've got someone with empathy rather than sympathy, straight away when you need it, go to a meeting. If you're really desperate, you go to a meeting. No lag time, no nothing, whatever. It's great. But sometimes, for a lot of people, they need something different or something more than that. And it'd be just nice if in this space there was something there that we can go towards to make that a possibility for young people. That's all I'm saying. Thank you so much.
Yes, Paul. Okay. Has anyone got anything else to want to say or add or no?
I would just say, I noticed that Lewis has put in a comment about GamCare run the young people support service. I do feel, yes, it is from sort of helping run an organisation, a charity. I mean, I do appreciate the regulations that hang around what we can and can't do, and this is particularly true when it comes to supporting young people. Understandably, there are safeguards that need to be put in place, but they can be quite restrictive. They can make it quite difficult to be able to interact with young people because of that. I mean, I feel understand where Pauline's coming from with GA. It is not easy. I do feel that we need to explore the possibility of self-directed help and also online communities, things where build friend sort of peer support in a way that is
gambling. This is something that you have to work on. So it's definitely an ongoing.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, there are. I mean, I think there is a big move towards digital support. A lot of the providers in the sector and also some of the charities are looking to create more ways of creating self-directed digital support, which is good in its way. I mean, I think a lot of people, the way their brains work, they do find it easier to think on their own level, to do it themselves. They're very inquisitive. They want to find out information, so they're almost sponges for help and information. I think a lot of people can be helped through self-directed digital information that's out there to help them. But from being sort of here as an organisation that represents lived experience, and with Pauline here as well, when we talk about GA, I think there's a massive recognition that peer support is so important for so many people in not just if you want reaching recovery, stopping gambling, but keeping in a supportive and stable recovery way. I think having people, it was mentioned, I think Paul mentioned the word empathy rather than sympathy earlier. I think having that there is so important for so many people in staying, you want staying safe and staying in recovery from addiction and from harm. So yeah, we have to find a new, not news, but it's a interconnected, a fluid way of providing support for people that's appropriate for different ways of interacting, different forms of interaction, and people who look to interact differently. And young people, I would like to think that I'd like to think we could create something could be creating the space, because you're absolutely right. Because so many if you want, harms that get formed due to sort of trauma, for instance, ACEs, or simply due to the struggles that people come with living in society and finding a place in society, they happen through the young person's developmental stages. So many of the areas where we have the opportunity to provide support and to maybe steer away from harmful behaviours do exist within sort of children, young people, and people under the age of 18. So it would seem to make obvious sense that they had a support mechanism, even when they provided peer support, that they could go to. But we always have the issues around, from internet safety, how sort of protecting young people online in forum and collective communities settings is also a big challenge. So I think we have to work with wider agency to see what we can develop on that.
Right. Okay. All right. I think unless there's anything, we'll call it a day for those who are left and staying on this long. So appreciate that. Good to see everybody, and again for those who are on, again, just thank you for all your support today and your input. It's been brilliant.